Det jo faktisk slik at det jo FN-resolusjonen fra 1947 som fortsatt så å si gjelder når det gjelder Jerusalem, og det grunnen til at at FNs sikkerhetsråd har sagt at ingen stater skal flytte sin ambassade til hverken Øst- eller Vest-Jerusalem før man har fått en fredsavtale hvor disse spørsmålene blir løst. Så det som spesielt på Trump, det at han har en sånn populistisk utenrikspolitikk og personlig populistisk utenrikspolitikk, og han forutsatt at han vil gjøre slike ting også å gjøre med at USA nå er verdens største oljeprodusent. Det så avhengig av faktisk olje. De kan Problemet jo det at amerikanerne har en tendens til å operere bare på den ene siden til forsvar for Israel, og det skaper motreaksjoner på den andre siden, selvfølgelig.
Ganske kort til slutt, et stort tema, men Trump sa altså i høst at over jul så vil han komme med en ny giv i Midtøsten-politikken. Har vi sett noe til den? Dette en del av det?
Ja, hele tiden det blitt sagt at denne fredsplanen skal da lanseres i april, men når han da nå har kommet med dette utspillet om Golanhøydene, så gjør det mye vanskeligere for Trump å få støtte fra sine arabiske allierte til denne fredsplanen, som vi ennå ikke vet akkurat hva innebærer.
Men når den kommer, så får du være velkommen igjen, Nils Budensjøen, professor ved Institutt for menneskerettigheter.
interessert i litt ulike ting i dynamikken mellom
Det
disse
mulig,
personene.
men Harald Fossberg, du også da journalist i Aftenposten, og du spilte jo da i Turboneger i riktig gamle dager. Du delte jo øvingslokale med gutta i med, som vi hører da i filmen. Og om du ikke filmanmelder, så kan du jo si noe om hvordan denne filmen forholder seg til den virkeligheten du håper på den tida.
Ja, nei, men altså, det jo åpenbart at her har Jonas Åkerlund tatt han at å dra fram liksom alle de mest makabre sidene ved miljøet. Jeg føler liksom at han ikke får med seg, kan du si, nyansen her. Og for eksempel for en som for meg, som da egentlig kjenner ganske rimelig godt til historien om VM, og kanskje håper at det kunne blitt liksom presentert til et bredere publikum, det jo sjanseløst. Det vi får det 5 minutter av filmen som ganske god. Det jo liksom hvor de på scenen med vokalisten som senere tar livet av seg, og hvor du har liksom den der liksom som han har sånn grep med musikken. Resten av tida så blir det bare
too has played into the request that Pompeo is making of the Lebanese by sort of giving Hezbollah the excuse, if you like, to say its presence there is justified.
And did Mr. Pompeo speak about what the United States is trying to do to stop the agreements?
He said that the Trump administration is trying to get messages to because they pointed out to Pompeo, and he publicly pointed this out in many comments, that Hezbollah is an elected member of the Lebanese parliament. It has ministers in the government, reflecting its electoral share in the parliament, and there's not much that they can do to break that relationship with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is also the only armed faction in Lebanon outside the state, and it is widely regarded as the most powerful armed faction. It's also well known here that if any Lebanese party did try to move against Hezbollah, they would risk incurring the wrath of Hezbollah's military might.
That was this slide of the Washington Post speaking from the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Well, President Trump has used Twitter to communicate his thoughts on foreign and domestic policies to Americans, bypassing the traditional media to reach his supporters and often taking his advisors by surprise with his policy initiatives. He's also used his Twitter to attack his perceived enemies, both living and, as it transpired this week, the dead. Months after the death of American patriot and war hero Senator John McCain, Mr. Trump revived the feud between the two men, tweeting about what he said was the lack of gratitude over the arrangements he'd made for the senator's funeral, and later saying, "I'm not a fan of Senator McCain, and that's fine." Republican pollster Frank Luntz is currently in London. He's also a critic of Mr. Trump. So what political gain might the president get from his latest comments?
Most people look at this and say, why are you doing this? That it's not necessary that you have a budget that you gotta get through Congress, that you have a policy on immigration that you're trying to promote, that there are continuing government reforms that you've been successful in passing. Why are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. And I agree with that.
But very few Republican politicians have actually come out and openly criticized him.
I think that most people don't really follow it anymore, that they're prioritizing what matters: immigration policy, the economy. What Trump tweets is not particularly relevant to getting legislation passed.
But President Trump continues to use Twitter to communicate policy initiatives, and we've seen it this week, just yesterday in fact, with his comments on the status of the Golan Heights. Again, I ask you why he uses that particular medium to communicate that policy.
Trump has used Twitter from the very beginning to bypass the traditional media, and he's used Twitter as a way to speak directly to the electorate, and his stuff gets reported. It's actually the most effective communication in terms of being able to get a message to the people that's unedited and, I guess, untwisted of any president ever. There are lots of people, starting with his own chief of staff, who don't endorse all of his tweets. But in terms of communication, it does work. Look, by the way, seriously, I wish Twitter did not exist. I don't find it very helpful in promoting democracy, but it does, and so the president uses it.
What is the evidence of there being widespread support amongst Republicans for the kinds of policies that Mr. Trump has adopted towards Israel?
No, that's significant. And it's both. It's a plus and a minus. That Republicans have increasingly supported a pro-Israel policy from the U.S. government, and Democrats have increasingly supported something much more either neutral or even, in some cases, anti-Israel. You have members of Congress who are now reflecting that. In fact, Israel's come to the forefront because of the two Democratic members from the Muslim community and the insistence among both Democrats and Republicans that they be censored in some cases for their points of view, which I don't agree with. I think you have the right to criticize Israel. I think you have the right to criticize the money in American politics. I recognize that to some people it's bordering on anti-Semitism. But if you look at the statistics, The Jewish community does donate a lot to the Democrats and donates less, but still significant, to the Republicans. These are simple facts. If you're elected to office and you happen to say things that cause the Jewish community to cringe, so what? And I say this as a Jew, that we have become so demonstratively hostile to the things that we disagree with that we want to take people apart if we disagree with them.
Has President Trump played a role in all this?
He has played a role in it. Maxine Waters, the Democratic congressman, has played a role in it. Democrats have done it. Republicans have done it. The media has done it. Twitter has done it. Google has done it. Facebook has done it. I could go on and on and on.
And I just wondered whether President Trump was setting out his table now for the 2020 campaign.
He tweets so often that is every tweet about politics, is every tweet about what's going to happen 18 or 20 months from now? I don't think so. I think he expresses his point of view, and I'm with a whole lot of people who thinks that he does it too often. I'm with a whole lot of people who thinks that there is a better approach, and that I am a very strong advocate in asking people to please tone it down.
So how is that going to colour, do you think, the campaign for 2020?
I'm scared to death that it's going to be the most negative campaign in my lifetime. I'm scared to death that all that both sides will do is try to destroy each other, to do the kind of character assassinations that cause people who are a little bit unstable to go off their medications and do something bad. We don't need more violence. We don't need more of this incitement that seems to be happening in politics on both sides of the Atlantic.
Republican pollster Frank Luntz. Since we spoke to him, President Trump has been back on Twitter, announcing that he's rolling back sanctions on North Korea. The United States imposed just a day ago. Chris Butler, the BBC's Washington correspondent, is on the line. Chris, what were these sanctions?
Well, these sanctions were on two Chinese shipping companies that allegedly have been used to try to get around the sanctions that have been placed by the international community on Pyongyang. Suggestions, for example, that they're being used to really transfer coal in the sea around North Korea. But the real surprise comes is that just 24 hours after these sanctions were put on place, along with pretty harsh words from the National Security Advisor John Bolton, in which he basically said that the maritime industry had to do more, that this was a warning that everyone should take notice and review their own activities to ensure that they're not involved in North Korea's sanctions evasion. Mr. Trump has simply, by tweet, changed that policy completely, done a U-turn, and effectively lifted these sanctions immediately. And that has come as a bit of surprise to those inside the administration as well as those outside.
Any explanation by Mr. Trump or his spokespersons?
It's a pretty amazing statement that has come from the White House. Now, he says, first of all, that Mr. Trump doesn't think these sanctions will be necessary, but the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, also said that this had partly been done because President Trump likes Chairman Kim. Essentially, this seems to be reaching out and trying to rekindle the relationship between the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, and the President Donald Trump following their failed summit in Vietnam last month. You get a real sense that this is an attempt to try and perhaps build on relationships. But if you think that inside the administration this has been carefully crafted policy, that these sanctions have been worked out by the Treasury Department alongside working with the National Security Advisor, all of a sudden Mr. Trump has just changed things with a single tweet, and I suspect that will cause some tension.
And we've every reason to believe that this is President Trump acting alone.
Yeah, I think that is very much true. If you take a look at what has happened here, President Trump is making this decision despite the Treasury Secretary and the National Security Advisor. And Steve Mnuchin is going to China this weekend to have discussions amid all of these US-China trade talks that are taking place. Now, you could argue that there's an attempt here perhaps to reach out to China as well as North Korea. But there is also another signal, and that's the fact that the Treasury Secretary, although he might do the negotiations, the message to China is that it's the President that matters, and it's the President who calls the shots.
Chris, many thanks for that. That was our Washington correspondent, Chris Butler. Coming up, Thailand is heading to the polls on Sunday in its first election since a military coup in 2014. So why are young activists campaigning for the leader of that coup to be Prime Minister?
personally, I like Pompeo in terms of he is very efficient in the way of his work. I feel that
It's not democratic, basically.
it's just the way of you get to the power, and I don't care. You have to see in another side that Pompeo, he make a decision very fast. He can do a lot of things that other government can't do.
And our headlines this hour: President Trump has reversed additional sanctions on North Korea just 24 hours after they were imposed. Washington says US-backed forces have deprived the Islamic State group of its last holdout in Syria, but the Syrian Democratic Forces say fighting is still going on. This is Julian Marshall with NewsHour live from the BBC in London. Here in Britain, the advertising watchdog, the ASA, has ordered 150 homeopaths operating in the UK to stop claiming they can cure autism. The therapy on offer was called CEASE, or Complete Elimination of Autistic Spectrum Expression. The BBC's Samantha Fennick has the story. Why has the ASA taken this decision?
They're extremely concerned that vulnerable people who may have just had a child diagnosed as autistic and might be reaching out for help and not knowing what to do, and that they're worried that they'll find this therapy, which has no scientific basis whatsoever to it. Those offering CEASE therapy say that toxins in the environment and vaccines cause autism. These claims have been found to be false, and they're worried that people will find this treatment and in some cases charge them hundreds of pounds for something which could be harmful and, as I say, has no scientific basis.
It seems extraordinary that the advertising watchdog has had to intervene in this kind of way. Is there no regulation of homeopaths?
In the UK, there is no regulation of homeopaths. People can set up and be a homeopath with no training. I could do it tomorrow if I wanted to. There are accredited courses that people can go on run by the Society of Homeopaths, but again, they're not regulated, so anyone can do it. So it's sort of been down to the Advertising Standards Watchdog to put some checks in place, so that people know that what they're getting into and that there is no proven science behind it.
And presumably this has been welcomed by the National Autistic Society.
The National Autistic Society say that anyone claiming to cure autism, say that no one can claim to cure autism. They say that it is how people are, and it's wrong that any therapy should say that they can provide a cure. It's a neurological disorder, and it's not a disease that can be treated.
Will these homeopaths, any of them, face any kind of legal action now?
Well, what's happened is the Advertising Standards Authority, the watchdog in the UK, has written this letter to 150 of these homeopaths, ordering them to stop making these claims on their websites and in any other marketing material. 5 of them have been referred for further investigation. They may face prosecution in the UK under consumer protection laws, and the Advertising Standards Authority has told the BBC that if those other homeopaths do not get what they say is their house in order, they will take further action against those as well.
So are the homeopaths going to remove this treatment for autism?
Well, what they've told us in a statement is that they agree that some of the terminology around this treatment could be misleading, and that they're now having conversations within the Homeopathic Society and within the kind of greater society of homeopaths out there, that they are going to try and change the naming, the wording around this, so that they avoid making unsubstantiated claims.
That was the BBC's Samantha Fennick. On Sunday, the people of Thailand will get their first chance to elect a government since the military seized power 5 years ago. It is not, however, a level playing field. The military has drafted a constitution which gives its own party a big advantage over its rivals, but it faces a strong challenge from the party whose government was ousted by the coup, the party backed by former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, which is still likely to win most seats in Parliament, and also from a new progressive party run by a young tycoon. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head reports from Thailand.
out to vote and we'll take care of you, she sings. A few hundred local people wave paper flags they've been given. Then the man who's seeking their support appears, looming over them like Big Brother on a screen above the stage. I will continue to do my best for you, promises General Prayut Chan-o-cha, the man who seized power in a coup 5 years ago. He's not actually standing for election, but his junta has drafted a constitution which allows a 250-seat Senate that they've appointed to help choose the next Prime Minister, more or less ensuring he will get the job again. Still, his new party, Palang Pracharat, needs to show it has popular support, and here it's struggling to make headway. By the end of General Prayut's video speech, the football field was pretty much emptied. I like the local candidate, says this food vendor, but here in the northeast, we all support Pheu-thai, the party backed by former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, which was deposed by General Prayut and is still wildly popular here. Pheu-thai candidates campaign in a more down-to-earth way than General Prayut's party, but to greater effect. These villagers enjoying the jokes cracked by the local Pheu-thai leader. They're still grateful to the exiled Mr. Thaksin for policies he brought in that they say transformed their lives.
We love him and miss him. He's a good man. Back then, money was flowing and easy to find.
In the capital Bangkok, the military party faces a different challenge. A crowd of mainly young Thais at an upmarket shopping mall line up for selfies with a tall, good-looking man. This is Thanathorn Juanrongruangkit, a wealthy businessman who last year started a new party called Future Forward, promising radical change. He's expecting to do especially well from first-time voters, numbering around 7 million.
I believe the political conflict over the last 12 years has significantly increased the political awareness of the people in this generation. So they want to voice.
One of the first to join his party was Taupi Boblin Chitrakorn, a 30-year-old former lawyer, now full-time activist. I joined him as he campaigned on his bicycle.
It really helps campaigning like this.
Yeah. Tao is contesting a seat in Bangkok. He has little chance of winning, but he hopes his enthusiasm will win enough votes to help Future Forward gain more of the 150 proportional seats.
Honestly, it would sound so bad. I want power, but power to change, and power from ordinary people, not from the politicians that have a link to the big capital. They get the money and they issue the law for those already rich people.
To try to counteract Future Forward's youthful appeal, Palang Pracharat has recruited its own young candidates. Pada Warakanon is one of them. I met her as she jogged and campaigned in one of Bangkok's few parks. Why, I asked, was she backing a coup leader for Prime Minister?
Personally, I like Kun Prayut in terms of he is very efficient in the way of his work. I feel that...
He's not democratic though, is he?
It's just the way of you get to the power, and I don't care. You have to see in another side that Kun Prayut, he make a decision very fast. He can do a lot of things that other government can't do.
Efficiency and stability. That's the military party's core message. How well it plays with Thai voters, we'll find out this Sunday.
Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head reporting from Thailand ahead of those elections on Sunday. Do stay with us here on NewsHour. A lot more to come in the next 30 minutes.
BBC.com/news, you get the latest news stories anytime you like. BBC.com/news offers you the most comprehensive news coverage in the world, and its stories are easy to search and navigate. Whether you're interested in science, health, technology or business, the BBC.com/news website can offer it all. It also gives you the opportunity to listen live to our news output or check the latest breaking news with our minute-by-minute news feed. If you want to take the news with you, we offer you downloadable podcasts to listen at your convenience, or archive programming so you can catch up on the programs you've missed, or you can access bbc.com. Feedback direct to our program teams. All this content, coverage and opportunity makes the BBC the world leader in news coverage online. bbc.com.
The Treasury Department imposed new sanctions on 2 Chinese shipping companies that it says have been helping North Korea evade international sanctions. The White House said Mr. Trump liked the North's leader Kim Jong-un, and he didn't think the latest sanctions would be necessary. The White House says US-backed forces have deprived the Islamic State group of its last remaining foothold in Syria, eliminating the territorial caliphate. President Trump illustrated the victory with maps of Iraq and Syria. But Mustafa Bali, a spokesman for the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are leading the fight on the ground, said that SDF forces were still battling Islamic State jihadists in the village of Baghouz. Cases of people affected by Cyclone Idai, which struck southern Africa more than a week ago. The Red Cross says malaria is also increasing among flood victims. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets of Algerian cities on the 5th consecutive Friday to demand the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The anti-government website Al Khabar said the rain in Algiers had not dampened people's spirits. As the uncertainty over Brexit continues, the French President Emmanuel Macron has said the European Union must not remain hostage to the crisis. He said EU states needed to protect their citizens. And that's the summary from BBC News.
Welcome back to NewsHour, and in a moment, a week after the cyclone which caused devastation in southern Africa, cases of cholera. After 2 fatal air crashes involving the same model of Boeing 737 MAX, we'll hear some troubling questions about Boeing's relationship with the US airline regulator, the FAA. Did it place too much trust in the manufacturer to regulate itself? But first, New Zealand, where thousands of people have observed 2 minutes silence in memory of the 50 victims of the mass shootings in 2 mosques in Christchurch 1 week ago today. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, told survivors and families of the victims that the nation mourned with them. Our reporter Rupert Wingfield-Hayes sent this report from Christchurch.
At exactly 1:32 this afternoon, the Muslim call to prayer rang out across Hagley Park in Christchurch. At the same moment last week, the gunman walked into the nearby Al-Nur Mosque and began shooting. Today, 20,000 people stood together in the park, people of every religion and of none. Then for a minute, the whole country stood silent to remember the 50 dead. When the Imam of the Al-Nur Mosque, Jamal Fouda, spoke, it was not of the hateful crime, but of the love that has been shown to him and his community since.
We are broken-hearted, but we are not broken. We are alive. We are together. We are
difficult to get worse because the lake was enormous.
The World Food Programme, Pedro Matos, says this would have been a big job for any country, but the lack of infrastructure in Mozambique made matters a lot worse.
Well, I guess if this had happened in the States or in a European country, the communication would have been better, so we'd have known earlier the extent of the damage. There would be a lot more air assets, a lot more helicopters and planes flying, but this is beyond any country's capacity to respond. It's a bit like, if you're in Europe, it's a bit like losing Luxembourg. It's just wiping out Luxembourg off the map. It's just the area is immense.
Water is receding. Boats have become the biggest partner now in the race to save lives. Rescue workers are relying on them to get to villages where help has not yet arrived.
From Mozambique by the BBC's Pumza Fulani. Boeing has, for the first time since the second crash of the plane, lost an order for its 737 MAX. The Indonesian national carrier Garuda has cancelled an order of 49 of them. The company's share price is 12% down on a month ago as so many questions have been raised even before we already know what happened in the Ethiopian Airlines crash, about why pilots weren't trained in managing an important control system designed sometimes to tilt the plane down, and more recently why certain safety features on the 737 MAX were sold to airlines as optional extras rather than being fitted as standard. Also questions for the US regulator, the FAA, over whether it placed too much trust in Boeing to regulate itself. Skiavo is a former Inspector General of the United States Department of Transportation. So what have we learned over the last couple of days?
The past couple of days, Boeing announced that they were going to have a software patch to repair the plane or to make it airworthy again, and that pilots would have some more training. But unfortunately, what also came out, unfortunately for Boeing, is that during this time also was revealed that two pieces of equipment, really a warning light and an indicator in the cockpit called the angle of attack indicator, that these two pieces of equipment were not standard in this aircraft, and that if airlines chose to order them, that would have given their pilots a fighting chance. One was a warning light, and when this MCAS system, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, that's the system that pushes the nose down over the pilot's control. The pilots can't stop it without turning off the equipment. That warning light would have told them when they had a problem and given them a clue what to do. And then also there was an additional angle of attack indicator that airlines could have ordered. It was extra and a lot extra.
And do we happen to know at this time whether the Indonesian plane that crashed, whether the Ethiopian Airlines plane that crashed were fitted with these safety features?
No, they were not. Few airlines bought them. Some airlines bought the indicator, the warning indicator light. Most did not around the world.
So, to use your own phrase, the pilots in those planes would not have had a fighting chance.
Well, that's correct, because the other problems here is this happened to them on takeoff. And when they're only 1,000 or 2,000 feet above the ground, altitude is time. And if you don't have a lot of altitude, you don't have time to troubleshoot. And it has come out that in both cases, the pilots were searching through the manuals, trying to figure out what to do. So they had to first figure out what was wrong with the plane. And had they had the warning light, they would have known what was wrong with the plane and that they had to turn off this system. But of course, the Lion Air pilots were never told the system even existed, and the Ethiopia pilots simply did not have time.
Why was Boeing able to get away with this, if that's the right expression?
That is the question. The way Boeing got away with it was this. Boeing marketed this plane as flying exactly like all other 737s, that airlines could easily move pilots onto this plane, off other 737s, back and forth. So Boeing had to make this plane fly like other planes, but when they put on the new engines, it did not. So they put this MCAS software program in to make the plane feel like previous 737s and fly like previous 737s. And they didn't tell pilots and they didn't tell airlines. and question how any airline would have bought the safety equipment if the pilots weren't told about it. And the Federal Aviation Administration certified the plane. Some in the FAA are saying they did not know about the MCAS, and if anybody at the FAA did know, they were personnel from the FAA in Seattle, co-located with Boeing in Seattle, and most of the Boeing inspectors were Boeing designated employees or inspectors, not FAA.
That's Mary Schiavo, former Inspector General of the United States Department of Transportation. Chemotherapy and radiotherapy for cancer can destroy someone's ability to have children. Women and girls can have eggs or ovaries frozen in order to have children after their therapy is over. Adult men can have a sperm sample frozen, but it's not an option for boys who've not gone through puberty. But scientists say they've taken a significant step towards helping boys with cancer stay fertile thanks to a baby monkey called Grady. I've been speaking to Editunji Fayome, lead author of the research report. He's at the Pittsburgh University School of Medicine.
So we basically surgically removed the testes from those primates and we cut them into small pieces, like tiny pieces. And some we froze down, some other ones we grafted fresh. So then we put those tissues on the back of the skin and then we waited for some months and then we went back.
What did you find?
We were so shocked that there were actually sperm cells in these tissues. We are hoping to have sperm cells there, but we are not sure. And so taking those tissues out one at a time and seeing sperm cells in them, it was a big surprise to us. And then the next thing we tried to do was to ask if those sperm cells can actually fertilize an egg and make a baby, which we also did.
With success?
Yes, successfully.
And the result was baby Grady?
The result was baby Grady, that's right.
Now, your work up until now has been with animals, with a monkey, in fact, demonstrating that sperm cells are capable of fertilization. But the procedures that you carried out could not possibly be carried out with a human, could they? The kind of dissection that you carried out on the monkey's testicles, you wouldn't do that with a human, would you?
There is not going to be a lot of difference in that approach, and this is the reason. Usually one of the things scientists or physicians are doing now is that they are collecting testicular biopsies, and what those biopsies are just some chunk of testicular tissues, which often they are also cut into small pieces like we did in this study. So it's just testicular biopsy, and exactly what we did are just same thing.
Just one further point. The tests that you carried out with monkeys were on healthy monkeys, but if this procedure was carried out with a boy with cancer, a biopsy was taken of the testicle and then reintroduced, what are the risks of actually reintroducing cancer into an individual?
So that's a fair question. This approach, this technique is very, very applicable to pubertal boys diagnosed with cancer that has not metastasized. So when you're diagnosed with cancer with metastasis, this might not be the best approach to actually preserve fertility. We are looking at options at the moment, but this approach is actually good for
reaction in the region.
Everybody's pretty dismayed and shocked by this. Syria is outraged, of course, which is predictable because Syria claims this land. It is widely recognized as Syrian land. Iran has also been very angry, although the Gulf countries have been very quiet, which isn't surprising because they are very close to Trump, but at the same time can't afford to be too supportive of a controversial issue like this.
Also this hour, President Trump has reversed additional sanctions on North Korea just 24 hours after they were imposed. This is Julian Marshall with NewsHour live from the BBC in London. So the United Kingdom will not be leaving the European Union on the scheduled date of March the 29th after all. But that's now the only certainty in a process that's still clouded in uncertainty and divisions within the British Parliament. The EU has told the Prime Minister Theresa May that she can have a 2-month technical delay if her withdrawal deal, already rejected twice by Parliament, is passed next week. If it's not passed, a 2-week reprieve to come up with some sort of alternative. So what next? I asked our political correspondent Rob Watson if his crystal ball was as cloudy as ever.
Absolutely. The question is, where is that, Julian? It enables me to say that, this profound crisis in British politics continues, and there really is no obvious resolution in sight. It seems very unlikely that Theresa May's deal with the British Parliament indeed and sanctions should make for a vote unless there is something.
cultural influence around the world as it roots in something that began in the West Midlands 50 years ago.
Solito reporting, and that's it from this edition of News Hour from Julian Marshall and the rest of the team in London.
With bbc.com/news you get the latest news stories anytime you like. Whether you're interested in science, health, technology or business, the bbc.com/news website can offer it all. It also gives you the opportunity to listen live to our news output or check the latest breaking news with our minute-by-minute news feed. All this content, coverage and opportunity makes the BBC the world leader in news coverage online. bbc.com/news.
This is the BBC World Service, and on our website you can explore more of our programmes, from documentaries to science. Listen and download at any time by going to bbcworldservice.com. On air, online and on smartphone, this is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to News Hour from the BBC World Service. I'm Julian Marshall. There's been a hostile reaction in the Arab world to President Trump's call for recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Golan Heights. The UN warns that time is running out for the hundreds of thousands stranded by the cyclone that hit southern Africa a week ago.
We've got 900,000 children that are affected. The emergency is still unfolding. The damage is enormous.
Research on monkeys gives fertility hope to boys with cancer. British homeopaths banned from offering cures for autism. And the first ever heavy metal congress brings together musicians from around the world, including some from the former war zone.
All the gigs we did in Damascus, and motor shows were dropping at the place. That was like, what cannot even express how it feels.
That's after the news.
BBC News with Simon Connolly. President Trump has tweeted that he is reversing additional sanctions imposed on North Korea only a day ago. Analysts say the reversal points to dissent in the Trump administration. Chris Buckley is in Washington.
Action was taken against two Chinese shipping firms after they were accused by the US of helping North Korea to evade existing international sanctions. At the time, the White House National Security Advisor John Bolton said it was an important step in a warning to the industry. But 24 hours later, Donald Trump ordered that the new sanctions should be immediately lifted. Explaining the reversal in policy, the President's press secretary said Mr. Trump didn't feel that the new measures were necessary and that he liked the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un.
The White House says US-backed forces have deprived the Islamic State group of its last remaining foothold in Syria. It comes more than 4 years after the United States first launched airstrikes against the Islamic State. John Silver reports.
Brandishing two maps in the press cabin of Air Force One, the President's spokesperson Sarah Sanders told reporters that the caliphate was now over. Map 1 showed in red the vast tracts of land that were held by ISIS when Donald Trump became president. The second map showed the last remaining scrap of land held by the self-styled Islamic State had gone. But white from the map doesn't mean the terrorist threat has disappeared.
Mustafa Bali is spokesman for the Syrian Democratic Forces who are leading the fight on the ground, said in a tweet the SDF was still backing IS jihadists who had hunkered down in the village of Baghuz in eastern Syria and who were refusing to surrender. Cases of cholera have been recorded in the Mozambican port of Beira among people affected by Cyclone Idai, which struck southern Africa more than a week ago. The Red Cross says malaria is also increasing among flood victims. Speaking after touring Beira, the head of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies said the scale and scope of suffering and damage was breathtaking. The United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has ordered an action plan for the UN to support efforts to protect religious sites worldwide in the wake of last week's New Zealand mosque massacre. Speaking at a mosque in New York, he said all places of prayer, should be safe havens, not sites of terror.
In the peace of this holy space, I am making a global call to reaffirm the sanctity of all places of worship and the safety of all worshippers who visit reverent sites in a spirit of compassion and tolerance. People everywhere must be allowed to observe and practice their faith in peace.
News from the BBC. Hundreds of thousands of Algerians have marched in streets in many towns and cities on the fifth consecutive Friday to demand the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. There are isolated reports of police using tear gas. An anti-government website said protesters rallied in the cities of Orleans, Oran, Bouira and Tizi-Ouzou. Dutch prosecutors have said a 37-year-old man arrested in the wake of Monday's deadly attack in Utrecht has admitted the charges against him. These include multiple murder or manslaughter with terrorist intent. 3 people were shot dead on a tram in the attack. The United States has imposed sanctions against Venezuela's Development Bank and 4 other institutions it controls. The U.S. Treasury said the bank was used by the government of President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela to prop itself up by moving assets abroad. In a statement, the Treasury Secretary said the continued use of murder, kidnapping and torture of Venezuelan citizens would not be tolerated. The UN Human Rights Council has condemned the governing body of international athletics for attempting to regulate testosterone levels in some female arrived in Beirut at a time of intense hostility towards a dramatic shift in US policy in the region. On Thursday, President Trump tweeted that, after 52 years, it's time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. That despite the fact that Israel seized 2/3 of the territory in a war in 1967, while its subsequent annexation of the Golan Heights from Syria has never been internationally recognized. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing re-election, has welcomed the move, but it's provoked anger in Arab capitals and in Iran, while Syria has said it'll use all available means to recover the area it lost in 1967. The Washington Post's Liz Sly is in Beirut.
Everybody's pretty dismayed and shocked by this because it came quite out of the blue at a time when people had been expecting that there wouldn't be any major announcement because the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is in the region and he had said there wouldn't be. Syria is outraged, of course, which is predictable because Syria claims this land. It is widely recognized as Syrian land. Iran has also been very angry and there's been condemnations also from Egypt, although the Gulf countries have been very quiet, which isn't surprising because they are very close to Trump, but at the same time can't afford to be too supportive of a controversial issue like this.
And what about Mr. Pompeo's host, Lebanon? What have they had to say?
Lebanon, I think, was completely caught off guard by this because they had been told there wouldn't be any announcement on Golan during Pompeo's visit, and there was just hours before he landed. And there was no public mention of the Golan issue in any of the encounters that we saw, except that there were no open press opportunities. Nobody was given a chance to ask any questions, so it's a little bit hard to tell what might have been said behind closed doors, but certainly it sort of threw us back into the works of what Pompeo had been planning here, because he came to ask the Lebanese to separate or at least dilute their relationship with Hezbollah, but this seemed to present Hezbollah with a massive excuse for continuing its armed presence in Lebanon and also the Golan, because is a threat from Israel to Arab land, so it sort of pulled the rug a bit out from under the US Lebanese allies who support Pompeo might have begun to secure.
Mr. Pompeo tried to frame his request to rein in Hezbollah in the context of President Trump's call to recognize Israeli sovereignty over Golan, because of course Israel says that Hezbollah is now effectively on its borders in the Golan because of their presence in Syria.
I don't think the Golan issue was on the agenda of the Lebanese talks, but certainly the Golan issue has played into the request that Pompeo is making of the Lebanese by sort of giving Hezbollah the excuse, if you like, to say its presence there is justified.
Did Mr. Pompeo speak about what the United States is trying to do Since we've been on there, there's been a development in the investigation, lengthy investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Let's go live now to our Washington correspondent, Chris Buckler. What is that development, Chris?
Yeah, Washington has effectively been holding its breath for many months now, expecting the delivery of Robert Mueller's report, the Special Counsel investigation into these allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 election, the claims of collusion involving the Trump campaign, and also questions about whether or not the president may have obstructed justice. Well, within the last few minutes, that report has been delivered to the Attorney General in Washington. This report, of course, has been 22 months in the making, and during that time, we've seen a number of individuals from the Trump campaign prosecuted for a number of offences. Among them, the campaign chairman Paul Manafort, his deputy Rick Gates, a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, George Papadopoulos. We also saw the former lawyer for President Trump, his Mr. Fix-It, of course, Michael Cohen, charged with offences as well. Although, as we said, most of them related to the Trump campaign itself. Specific focus on a specific interest in what the president has to say, and it is not up to the Attorney General to decide what information is released from this report and what information will be given to Congress. And as you can imagine, Julia, inside Congress there are many members, particularly Democrats, who would head down to see what Mueller has provided.
And what's the time frame for this?
Well, I suspect there will be a pressure for it to happen quickly, but we don't know at this stage just how long this report is, and we do know that the Attorney General wants to go through it. He has just released a statement, William Barr, who is the US Attorney General. He says he wants to determine by having conversations with Robert Mueller and also the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, what information from the report can be released to Congress and the public consistent with the law. Now, he says he remains committed to as much transparency as possible, and he will keep them informed as the status of his review. But of course, that doesn't give a timeline, and there is this push for as much information as possible, as you can imagine. Now, what we expect to be inside this report will be Robert Mueller's investigation, and in terms of the detail, we expect him to look at a number of different things. For example, we expect him to say why some people have been charged and why others haven't.
Chris, many thanks for that. That was Washington correspondent Chris Buckler, and of course, more on that story, hopefully, before the end of this edition of NewsHour. Coming up, Thailand is heading to the polls on Sunday in its first election since a military coup in 2014. So why are young activists campaigning for the leader of that coup to be Prime Minister?
Personally, I like Kun Prayut in terms of he is very efficient in the way of his work. I feel that
he's not democratic, though, is he?
It's just the way of you get to the power, and I don't care. You have to see in another side that Kun Prayut, he make a decision very fast. He can do a lot of things that other government can't do.
And our headlines this hour: Special Counsel Robert Mueller has delivered his report on his lengthy investigation to the US Attorney General. President Trump has reversed additional sanctions on North Korea just 24 hours after they were imposed. This is Julian Marshall with NewsHour Live from the BBC in London. Here in Britain, the advertising watchdog, the ASA, has ordered 150 homeopaths